another way of saying it is that we want to give people superpowers. So it's not just that we're restoring your prior brain functionality, but that you actually have functionality far greater than a normal human. That's a super big deal.
Can you explain what Neuralink is and what the goal of it is?
We put a chip in your brain to control your mind. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Concerns not alleviated.
Yeah, there you go. Jump right in. Step right up. Who wants one? No, so Neuralink, you'll be able to see Neuralink coming from a very long distance, because any device that you implant in a human you have to go through so many tests. It moves very slowly. You just do a few people at a time, and then you go to extreme lengths to prove safety. You have to go through the FDA approvals. Like, we're not trying to sidestep any, regulatory approvals. We're doing everything, by the book and with maximum. We're going far beyond what the requirements are of the FDA from a safety standpoint. Mm-hmm. And the initial devices will really just be pretty basic. It'll be about restoring functionality to people who've lost their connection between their brain and their body. So you can imagine, like, if, say, Stephen Hawking could talk or communicate as fast as somebody with a fully functioning body. Mm-hmm. That would be amazing. So that's like what we're trying to do. That's our first application, is to restore functionality to quadriplegics, tetraplegics, and people who have just, for whatever reason, no longer have a connection between, or a limited connection between their brain and their body. And then the second application would be restoration of eyesight. So if somebody's gone completely blind, maybe even has lost the optic nerve, you can actually still directly stimulate the neurons in the visual part of the cortex. So you can give direct vision to the brain. In fact, you could actually, depending upon what cameras you use, you could actually see in different wavelengths. Okay. Geordie LaForge from you could have that I actually watched an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation with special effects compared to what we're used to are not that great, but he's got the wraparound glasses and he can see in different wavelengths. So you can see ultraviolet, infrared, and that kind of thing. So you can actually do that. You could say you could see in radar if you want.
A way to think about the Neuralink device is like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch with tiny wires or electrodes. Those tiny wires are implanted in the brain and they read and write electrical signals. A lot of people think the brain is this incredibly mysterious thing. It is mysterious in a lot of ways, but it does operate with electrical signals. So if you can read and write those electrical signals, you can interface with the brain. And the device is sized so that it is the same size as the piece of skull that is removed. So if it's like a few centimeters diameter of skull that's removed, we replace that with the device after implanting the tiny wires with the surgical robot. And that enables read-write capability to the neuron. It's completely wirelessly. I could have a Neuralink right now, you wouldn't know. And it charges inductively, so you could just basically have an electromagnetic you charge the device with. It's like an Apple Watch, exactly. The Neuralink device is something that really absolutely minimizes damage to the brain, absolutely minimizes the load on the patient, and the goal is to allow someone to live a completely normal life. You won't even notice that someone even has the device. The current input devices are centered around human hands. Yeah. So it's like we've got these little meat sticks that we move, and there's a certain rate at which you can move your fingers. And so we've got the mouse and the keyboard and with a joystick control, Xbox controller or something like that. Since if you're not trying to use your hands, you actually don't need those conventional control mechanisms. And so this is why ultimately I think you'll be able to do conceptual telepathy, where you can communicate entire concepts to someone else with a Neuralink or to the computer. Mm-hmm. So what about upgrades? So yeah, we do think it's going to be important to be able to upgrade the device over time. Just like you wouldn't want an iPhone 1 stuck in your brain forever. If you've got an iPhone 15, you probably want the iPhone 15, not the iPhone 1. So I think people over time will be able to upgrade their Neuralink. So we'll take the Neuralink device out and put a new one in. I think we can help a lot of people with brain injuries. I mean, ultimately, with an implantable device, you can, I think, address almost any brain or spine injury. Ultimately, the goal of Neuralink is to have a high bandwidth interface in order to mitigate the risk of digital superintelligence. I'm not saying it will work to mitigate the risk. It is just, it might help. This is somewhat esoteric, but the limiting factor, I think, for AI alignment long term is probably going to be the bandwidth. How quickly can we communicate with our digital tertiary self? So we already have a digital sort of third layer above the limbic system and the cortex, which is our phones and our computers and all of our electronic devices. But the rate of communication
to them is very slow. The sustained bits per second output of a human is well below 10 bits per second. So if you think, especially if you say over a 24-hour period, it's below 5 bits per second. So it's very slow when computers can communicate at trillions of bits per second. I think this will be important for AI alignment, is to be able to increase the bandwidth of communication by many orders of magnitude. And along the way, it will solve brain and spine injuries. And I think ultimately there's potential there to reanimate the body. So you take the signals from the motor cortex from one Neuralink and then send them to another Neuralink that is just past where the severed spinal cord is, and you essentially shunt the signals from the motor cortex and both the sensory signals, and so you need to get to the somatosensory cortex, motor cortex, and you can shunt the signals, and you should be able to enable someone to walk again. So I think that will be quite profound, and I'm confident that it is physically possible to do so.
And what's the long-term goal for it? Where does it go? What are the ethical boundaries of it?
The thing I wanted to emphasize is that it's not going to like sort of pounce on us overnight. You'll see it coming. It's going to be very slow. In fact, I really think that artificial general intelligence or digital superintelligence is likely to arrive before we have really advanced neural links. At least that's where the trend is right now. But ultimately, the idea would be to achieve a symbiosis between our biological mind and our kind of digital mind. So we're already kind of a cyborg if you think of like your phone and your computers as an extension of yourself. In fact, if you leave your phone behind, it's like you have missing limb syndrome. You're like, where did it go, So the phone is a kind of an extension of ourselves. Like computer is, the various applications that we use are already an extension of self. So we are already a cyborg. It's just that the interface is with our eyes and our fingers.
Yeah. And
that interface, especially output, the rate at which we can type words into a phone or a computer, it's very slow. Our input is much better because with the data rate from vision is many thousands of times, maybe a million times better than the rate at which we can output. So input is like maybe, I don't know, roughly a million times better than output. So what a Neuralink device can do is improve that bandwidth, allow you to be sort of much more symbiotic with the AI extension of yourself. So you can think of like a human brain really could be arguably divided into two parts. One is kind of like the primitive brain, the reptile brain, it's sometimes called. It's like a sort of basic instinct. And then we've got the cortex, like the higher level thinking, planning, and that kind of thing. But the two operate symbiotically. So I haven't yet met anyone who wants to delete their limbic system or delete their cortex. Everyone's quite happy having both.
Yeah.
They're like, I like it the way it is, But your cortex is way smarter than your limbic system. But the irony is that even though the cortex is way smarter than the limbic system, most of what it's doing is trying to make the limbic system happy. It's like limbic system's hungry. Okay, let's get some food. Then limbic system is horny. Okay, let's, have sex or whatever. That's how it used to be. So even though you've got a cortex that's way smarter than the limbic system, the cortex is still basically just trying to make the limbic system happy. And then if you think of like the computers as a sort of a third layer, the AI as a third layer, it's not necessarily the case that the AI would be acting contrary to our interests. I think if it's closely linked with biological intelligence, I think it could actually be just simply, again, trying to make the cortex happy, which is trying to make the limbic system happy. So I think we'll put even more computing power into trying to get laid, basically. Now the AI is going to help you get laid.
There's no physics barrier to fully solving paralysis. That is perhaps a way to say it, that you've got signals coming from your motor cortex that if they are transferred past the point where nerves are damaged, essentially it's basically a communications bridge. So you bridge the communications from the motor cortex past the point in the neck or spine where the nerves are damaged. And it is possible from a physics standpoint to restore full body functionality. It's a very hard technical problem, but there is nothing that prevents it happening from a physics standpoint. In terms of next phase of rollout, we really want to make sure that we make as much progress as possible between each Neuralink patient. So we're only just moving now to our second Neuralink patient, but we hope to have, if things go well, high single digits this year. And I don't know, maybe this is somewhat dependent on regulatory approval and how much technical progress we make, but within a few years, hopefully thousands. So if the wheelchair has a Bluetooth interface, you could just Bluetooth interface to the wheelchair. Yeah. And that's probably something we should do pretty soon.
It's really a matter of paperwork. Showing that you don't want to drive off a cliff.
I think we can limit the speed. So it doesn't go careening off into disaster. But so just make it go slowly at first. But so being able to, really the Neuralink device just should work generally for anything that's got a Bluetooth interface,
including potentially an Optimus.
Yes, yeah, you could communicate with Optimus. Yep, absolutely. Optimus will also be able to talk to Optimus, but like
might not just beam it.
But you could just instead of talking, you could just beam it directly. Or if someone has lost the use of speech, then they can still communicate to an Optimus. They can communicate telepathically to Optimus or by Bluetooth. And so even if someone has completely lost the ability to speak, they could still control out with their computer or phone. An exciting possibility long term also is to say, if you take parts of the Optimus humanoid robot and you combine that with a Neuralink, let's say somebody has lost their arms or legs, we could actually attach an Optimus arm or Optimus legs and do a Neuralink implant so that the motor commands from your brain that would go to your biological arms now go to your robot arms or robot legs. And again, you have basically cybernetic superpowers. Yeah, like I said, it's just a cyberpunk Deus Ex future where you have cybernetic upgrades that are actually better than your biological. And certainly we'll have particularly as we expand to a large number of customers or patients for Neuralink, the understanding of the brain will improve dramatically. Because really, there isn't a very fine-grained understanding of the brain today because there's just the sensors aren't good enough. You got fMRI, which is pretty good, but it's still not as good as actually having high bandwidth electrodes in the brain. Another way of saying it is that we want to give people superpowers. So it's not just that we're restoring your prior brain functionality, but that you actually have functionality far greater than a normal human. That's a super big deal. Yeah, and can you multitask with it? Yeah, in fact, if you look at Nolan's streaming, and you can just check out Nolan's streams on the X platform, he's multitasking all the time. So he's while talking and listening to podcasts. And, yeah, exactly. It's really just if you're using your hands and you're playing a video game while talking. There are people that have severe schizophrenia. They've got basically things that their brain is malfunctioning in some way. And this is actually due to really like physical circuitry issues. You can think of the brain as really, it's a biological computer. And if some of the circuits are crossed, it's going to, it's going to crash or it's going to have issues but with a Neuralink device, we can fix those issues and give someone who has, say, severe schizophrenia or psychosis of some kind, allow them to live a normal life. I think that is one of the likely things in the future. Yeah. You can certainly imagine, I'm sure people have like parents, grandparents who have memory that's not working as well as it used to be. Sometimes they forget who their grandchildren are or what day it is. And this is something that a Neuralink device could help fix.
The USDA inspector who came by the Neuralink facilities literally said in her entire career, she has never seen a better animal care facility. We are the nicest to animals that you could possibly be, even to the rats and mice, even though they did the plague and everything. It is like monkey paradise. The thing that gets conflated is that there were some terminal monkeys where, this is actually several years ago, where the monkeys were about to die. And we're like, okay, we've got an experimental device. It's the kind of thing we should only put in a monkey that's about to die. Now the monkey died, but it didn't die because of the Neuralink. It died because it was, had a terminal case of cancer or something like that. It has never caused the death of a monkey. Unless they're hiding something from me, it has never caused the death of a monkey. And in fact, we've now had monkeys with Neuralink implants for like 2-3 years, and they're doing great. And we've even replaced the Neuralink twice. It already works in monkeys and works quite well. With monkeys that can play video games just by thinking.
I think what it is that concerns people about it, number one being new, but I think the main thing is the fact that this is something that's like inside your body, right? I think the idea of putting a chip the idea of someone putting a chip in my brain, I just have I have a visceral no. Right? I have a very visceral reaction.
It's an optional thing. I mean, we're not going to,
Would it be though long term?
I hope so. I think it should be optional. Yeah. It'd be bizarre if it was not. No, I think it's...
The reason I ask is because smartphones right now are sort of optional, but if you don't have a smartphone, the way everything is sort of designed around society, yes, you can not have a smartphone, but it's a massive hindrance and disadvantage in many ways.
True. A smartphone is almost essential in a modern society to do things.
Yeah. So could a Neuralink end up in that same sort of place?
It's possible, but I'm just saying if it does, it's many decades from now. So it's not like, it's not today's problem.
Yeah.
I'd worry a bit more about digital superintelligence. I'd worry about let's try to avoid World War III.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're at least having enough kids to sustain our population, basic stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting. And I think that should give hope to a lot of people in the world that the future is going to be exciting and inspiring. And the technology is going to give them superpowers. That's amazing.